West Denver. Sleep deprived and heavily caffeinated.
All right, let's do this then.
This is the Jeff and Bill Show.
I don't agree with that.
They don't always agree, but hey, at least they have coffee.
Coffee.
And each other.
I love you, man.
God help us.
I want to bless him. We need all the help we can get.
Now here's Jeff Hunt and Bill Thorpe. The Jeff and Bill Show on News Talk 710 KNUS.
It is 6 a.m. in the Mile High City on this Friday, October 3rd, 2025. Good morning, Denver, Colorado. You've tuned in to the Jeff and Bill Show, News Talk 710 KNUS. I'm your co-host, Jeff Hunt, along with Bill Thorpe, bringing you the freshest insights, hottest takes from the right, left, and center. Got a great show for you today. We're going to talk the Anti-Defamation League, their relationship with the FBI. It's changing. They had a list where Turning Point USA was listed on their glossary of extremism and hate. ADL removing its entire list after receiving a lot of backlash for putting them on there. And I've got to question these organizations, these progressive organizations like the SPLC, that create these, quote, hate lists that become, in some cases, actual maps for retribution. If you remember a few years ago, the Family Research Council had someone show up with a gun, shoot a security officer. Fortunately, the security officer was able to intervene and prevent a much worse mass shooting that could have taken place. This person had brought in Chick-fil-A sandwiches and was going to leave them on the dead bodies of people they shot at the Family Research Council. And in their pocket was a list from the SPLC. So these hate lists that exist, what do you think of them? ADL now removing theirs and the FBI ending their relationship with the Anti-Defamation League. We'll talk about that. Craig McElroy is the Denver Public Affairs Director for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, is going to join us in the 7 o'clock hour, talk about a wild few weeks for the Church of Latter-day Saints here in America. New president, obviously the heartbreaking shooting that took place in Michigan, but things are going to be changing with the new president. What should we expect to see? Craig McElroy will be joining us here in the 7 o'clock hour. 8 o'clock hour, Trump administration trying to make some changes to universities. I got the list of demands he sent to these major elite Ivy League universities. We'll talk about what that's going to look like in the 8 o'clock hour. And then the 9 o'clock hour, Lauren Boebert's going to join us, Congresswoman from the 4th Congressional District. We're going to talk the government shutdown, who's to blame, who's going to blink, what negotiations are taking place. And she endorsed Victor Marx earlier this week at Victor's campaign launch. We'll talk about Victor and her support of him. So, a whole lot to cover. Plus, we're going to wrap the whole week up with some cowboy poetry. But now it's time for news and comment. Mr. Blake Olson.
Blake Olson.
Blake Olson, news and comment.
Good Friday morning, 52 and clear outside. It is just beautiful. The stars are out right now as the sun gets ready to rise here in Denver and up and down the Front Range. Expecting a high of 82 today. This portion of the news sponsored by Pastor Camp Heating and Air Conditioning at 303-777-1234 to learn more about special savings opportunities on Lennox equipment. Our top story.
It's politics, and they're doing things and asking for things that you wouldn't want, and most people that are sane wouldn't want, and patriots wouldn't want. They want illegal aliens to get taken care of with health care. And it's not, look, I have a bigger heart than they do, but it's not even that. Everybody in the world is going to enter our country and say, give us free health care.
The partial shutdown continues. It's day 3. That was DJT, of course, on OAN, and Democrats were crushed in the election. We the people spoke, yet these fools are doubling down doubling down on their Marxist ideology. They can't be this dumb, can they? Or are they? Or who are they working for? What's going on? They trying to destroy the country?
Give us this, give us that. It's going to ruin all of the things that we have, all of the plans that we have. Obamacare was never any good, but it subsists. It's there. And everything will be destroyed because no country has enough money to take care of that. So they want the illegals. They refuse to get away with open borders. They want to do open borders. If they ever got in, they'll open up the borders. We have closed borders now. You only come into our country legally. But they would open up the borders in 2 minutes, and you understand it better than anybody because you've covered it so well for so long. Even though you're a young guy, you've covered it very well. They want transgender for everybody. They want men and women's sports. They haven't learned what happened in the last election. I think they forgot.
Yes, sir. And Hakeem Jeffries is banking on half the population being as dumb as the crew from The View on ABC.
Public sentiment. At the end of the day, the public knows that Donald Trump and Republicans have shut the federal government down, and that they're continuing to engage in the chaos and the cruelty and the corruption that we've seen from this administration from day one of the presidency. Again, this is the first week of their shutdown, but we've had months of chaos and cruelty unleashed on the American people.
Yeah, by you. By the left.
Cruelty.
Cruelty unleashed.
That's Dollar Store Obama, right?
That is Dollar Store Obama. That is one of the best nicknames of all time. Oh, man. And it gets a little more cruel on social media. That one is great. Colorado's federal courts are preparing for an extended shutdown. They have a two-phase plan. Honestly, it's too boring to talk about. I mean, it just goes on. Just let's see what happens with these fools. DJT could void more than $500 million of funding for clean energy projects in Colorado. According to Fox 31, 34 projects are related to Colorado. CSU, the School of Mines, and the Colorado Energy Office are some of the state's institutions facing the cuts. Democrats upset that some out-of-office messages automatically say Democrats are to blame for the partial shutdown. They got the serious face here.
As that employees did not give their consent and that this was done without their knowledge. And I had one employee tell me today that they actually went back into their email, changed their out-of-office message twice, and it was reverted back and overridden by this actual partisan messages. So it's very concerning. The Department of Education also, and notably, not denying that this is happening. They tell me, quote, the email reminds those who reach out to the Department of Education employees that we cannot respond because Senate Democrats are refusing to vote for a clean CR and fund the government, adding where's the line. Some federal workers raising real concerns about potential violations here of the Hatch Act, which of course states that federal employees are required to perform their duties in a nonpartisan manner.
Okay. You work for the government. You can have your own private email. Meanwhile, Planned Parenthood clinics in Wisconsin have halted abortion services due to the funding crisis and can no longer access Medicaid funds. Great news there. Apple takes down the ICE tracking apps following a disturbing rise in violence and the recent shooting, of course, at the ICE facility in Dallas. ICE Block has been deleted from the App Store after pressure from AG Pam Bondi. 30-year-old Marquise Daniels is facing 60 years behind bars for his role in the 2020 robbery and murder of 27-year-old Blair McQueen from Greeley. That sentence was handed down on Thursday. Crews in L.A. County raced to the scene last night to extinguish a fire burning in the largest oil refinery on the West Coast. The massive Chevron refinery processes over 250,000 gallons of crude oil every day. The fire was burning a couple of miles south of L.A. International Airport, but flames were not impacting airport operations and no injuries were reported. All right, college football tonight. CSU at San Diego State, 8:30 kickoff. Big weekend of college football and the NFL coming up this weekend. The 2-2 Broncos head to Philly to face reigning champions and the undefeated Eagles, the Eagles. And here's Pat Surtain.
We could prove a lot to ourselves. We could gain a lot from this game and also lose a lot, knowing the magnitude of it. But, it's another opponent. Obviously they coming off a Super Bowl.
Former head coach Vic Fangio is now the Eagles defensive coordinator. Oh, that'll be fun to see him again. Thursday night football, overtime last night. The Rams about to win the game. But big defensive lineman from the Niners has other ideas.
Williams, can he get in? They signal that with the ball coming out, and it goes the other way, and the call is a fumble in San Francisco ball. Wow. That is unbelievable.
I think he got it out of there. He'll come from our left. You'll see a big hand come in right there. Knock that ball. That is a fumble, and the big fella, the rookie out of Texas, makes maybe the play of the game.
Oh, man, I love that. He punched that ball out of there. What a great play. I got to get his name. I'm sorry. I didn't have a chance to look it up. But beautiful. Great job by the big defensive lineman punching the ball out at the goal line, and the Niners win it and up their record to 4-1. The Tigers, Cubs, and Yankees punching their tickets to the division series with wins last night. 51 in Westminster, 50 in Littleton, 52 in Denver. Jeff and Billy continue. Blake Olson, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Your KNUS forecast for the Denver metro area keeps the good times rolling for today and this weekend, but we will be trending a little bit milder over the course of the weekend, especially to close it out on Sunday when highs will be near 70. This Friday, though, sunny to mostly sunny, middle to maybe an upper 80, nighttime lows near 60, near 80 Saturday, some late day showers and thunderstorms.
Weather is a service of L&L Heating and Air Conditioning. For quick, trustworthy, and dependable service, call L&L Heating and Air Conditioning at 720-851-1691. Visit them online at bestdenverhvac.com. That's bestdenverhvac.com. You'll be comfortable with L&L. I'm meteorologist Mark Huer in the 710 KNUS Weather Center.
All right, the Anti-Defamation League has removed its entire glossary of extremism and hate, Fox reporting, after receiving backlash, including from Elon Musk and Republican lawmakers, for listing Turning Point USA as an extremist group. The outrage comes nearly 3 weeks after Turning Point's co-founder, Charlie Kirk, was assassinated at Utah Valley University while speaking with a crowd on campus. TPUSA's backgrounder page on the ADL website falls under the Center of Extremism tag and describes the conservative group as having ties to, quote, a range of right-wing extremists, and has generated support from anti-Muslim bigots, alt-right activists, and some corners of the white supremacist alt-right. The ADL, who also lists dozens of controversial statements tied to Turning Point USA members or events, speakers dating back as far as 2015, and wrote that Kirk used the movement to promote, quote, Christian nationalism, unquote. In response to the listing, Tesla CEO Elon Musk wrote on X on Sunday that the ADL hates Christians, and which makes it itself a hate group. He continued in a separate post, using such false and defamatory labels about people and organizations encourages murder. Anna Paulina Luna chimed in on Monday with criticism of ADL, writing, America First is not hate speech. Turning Point USA is not a hate group. This happened similarly through the SPLC, the Center or the Southern Poverty Law Center, who has their extremist groups that lists everybody from Focus on the Family to the Alliance Defending Freedom to Family Research Council on their hate group. And that, in one particular case, became an actual map for somebody to grab a weapon, walk into the Family Research Council, and start trying to murder people. They had the list in their back pocket. They also brought Chick-fil-A. If you remember, this was probably, 10 years ago now, 12 years ago, when Chick-fil-A's support of traditional marriage put them on this kind of target list of radical leftists. And you remember the guy who drove through the drive-through asking for hate water and trying to shame the little girl that worked there? So these lists from progressive organizations that originally started out by trying to just kind of map organizations like the KKK expanded and is essentially lumped in mainstream conservative Christian organizations with some of the most god-awful extremist organizations that are actively trying to, harm people based upon their race or their gender identity, and has become a target list for murder, as Elon Musk points out. Now, the FBI has decided that they're no longer going to work with the Anti-Defamation League. This coming from Fox. Patel has cut ties with the Anti-Defamation League, basically because they have become progressive organizations that have created a list of their political opponents, tied them to wildly extreme, hateful organizations like the KKK, and then done that in an effort to discredit and dismiss their political opponents, the FBI no longer wanting to do this. Bill, when you look at these lists, these, quote, extremist lists, did they go too far in lumping groups like Focused on the Family, for instance, with the KKK? And has this become a liability for some of these groups that have been targeted, like the Family Research Council? Your thoughts, sir?
Yeah, I think some of the lists have gone too far. I think they've bled into politics, and some of it has to be if you putting a group on the same type of a list as the KKK, you need to take some time to look at the context as far as behavior examples and how people were interpreted. I think they have gone too far, SPLC more than the ADL, in my opinion, just personally. But we've had, the thing that stuck out to me was your comment that you were reading from someone talking about this statement of labeling these people as extremists or whatever encourages violence. Yeah, it kind of returns to a repeating theme here on the show. Yeah, we label our political opponents as extremists universally across the board. We label them as extremists. It doesn't matter if you're a conservative or a liberal. You will, or at least if you examine your conversations in the previous 3 months, I would be willing to bet you have labeled some of your political opponents as extremists, and probably far extremists. In fact, I would submit that the way in which you listeners to the Jeff and Bill Show have labeled some of your political opponents may lead someone possibly listening to that conversation to think there may be violence that should be encouraged. Not that you're encouraging it, just that if these people are this bad, why doesn't somebody do something about it? And I think that's kind of the issue here, is that we as a society have started to label our opponents as these extremists and lump them into the worst of the worst. This is what we do. I think the SPLC went too far, and I think their list became almost a non-starter to a time because of how many people they were lumping into the extremist groups. The ADL, I think the list needed to be, there needed to be more nuance, because I can see the ADL saying that Turning Point USA used to have members that expressed these views in their midst. That could be part of it, but they've separated from them. The examples would be Nick Fuentes and Candace Owens. Candace Owens, we've heard lamenting the fact that she was about to make up with Charlie Kirk, yet she has expressed some very, very, very anti-Semitic positions in the previous 12 months. Yet, according to her, now her telling of the story, is that she and Charlie were about to make up and make nice. And she even says maybe she was going to be offered back into the fold of Turning Point. That, to me, would be shocking. I don't see that. I don't see that in any way, shape, or form. However, that would give credence to ADL saying Turning Point at least dances with people that have expressed anti-Semitic views. That's a problem. I think that their terms and their explanation lacks nuance that should be pointed out, that Turning Point USA distanced themselves from those people as soon as they expressed those views. And I think that would be fair to just say, these people have come out of this group, but they have been ostracized once they became extremists. Yeah, I don't view Turning Point as an extremist group in any way, shape, or form, but I think that ADL does themselves a disservice on this one. And I also would question ADL coming into the FBI, and that would be the source of extremist training. I just worry about that one. If the FBI, why can't the FBI determine that?
You can't have your own division on that?
There's nobody in there that has the time and efforts to, that's a strange one for me. But yeah,
I do think it's important to point out, I'm not sure that Turning Point ever had any relationship with Nick Fuentes. In fact, it was an actual adversarial relationship where Fuentes would show up and counter-protest because he wasn't allowed to be a part of Turning Point stuff. So I think that's an important clarification. I'm not aware of any time that they were ever aligned on any of the stuff that they're doing. But yeah, I understand the concern around hate groups, because there are people who want to kill people based upon their race, or excise them from society, or those types of things. I have no problem with going, hey, kids, this is what the KKK is. This is what they believe. They're motivated by race. They actually hate people based upon race, and help people understand that. Don't get involved with people like that. I would say the same thing about Antifa. Not that they're race-based, but I think that they're hate-based. I think they want violence against people, and you shouldn't be in a relationship or joining their groups or following them or those types of things. They're deeply problematic. So I understand that. But what I saw happen, I would say late 90s on, was a willingness to lump in traditional little o Orthodox, not Orthodox Church, but Orthodox Christianity, and their beliefs with regards to traditional marriage, with hate groups out there that actually want to harm people. And I think it was politically motivated. I think that LGBTQ activists wanted to sideline traditional Christian thought to make it seem extreme that you believe that marriage should be between one man and one woman. And they saw it as a strategy to try to isolate, shame, and eventually weaken the arguments around traditional marriage. And I think it created a lot of problems. With the case of the Family Research Council, it actually resulted nearly in the death and a mass shooting that took place. Luckily, the security guard survived, but that's where I saw it become political and become really problematic. So glad to see that these lists are being developed or being addressed, at least by the Trump administration. But you had just this year, for the first time, focus on the family, which isn't nearly what it was like under Dobson as far as like political engagement. So they're not on the nose fighting like they did under Dobson. And this year, under Jim Daley's leadership, got labeled a hate group. So, and it was simple, not because they're out there calling for the death of gays or anything like that, but simply because they advocate that marriage should be between one man and one woman. So they ultimately, by politicizing these lists, made them less valuable in addressing the organizations that actually hate people. And that's a problem in my mind.
It is.
So,
it is a problem because it lacks context and distinction. Because, you know, when you put someone on a list that has KKK and people like that are the other people on that list, you're lumping them and you're asking someone to draw a conclusion about them that may not necessarily be true. And so that's why there needed to be much, much, much more nuance as far as, and you talk about the FRC and the guy showing up with the list. I believe Pelosi's attacker also had a list of people and lawmakers that he was going after. And the man that recently killed the Michigan lawmaker and her husband also had a long list of politicians that he was going after. It's different than your list, but what I'm talking about is this idea of a list of targets also seems to crop up somewhat repeatedly in these type of motivated attacks.
yeah, and
Just
here's
saying.
a question I have, honest question for you and for our listeners as well. I'm not, I don't want to jump to the conclusion that all lists are terrible, right? Like, we did a list of lawmakers based upon their voting habits down at the Colorado State Capitol as to whether or not they embrace the values of faith, family, and freedom. And granted, it wasn't a name and shame operation where we're highlighting the lawmakers that didn't, but we wanted to honor the lawmakers that did. And I created the first ever congressional scorecard on international religious freedom, where we actually rated and tracked lawmakers to with regards to their votes on how they embraced international religious freedom and did they promote it, because we wanted to encourage lawmakers to perform well on the list, right? You want to go to your constituents and go, look, I got an A+ for advancing religious freedom internationally. So lists in themselves aren't terrible. It's how we catalog and analyze how people are doing.
Here's the example. When you guys were doing the list, ranking people on their support to internationally as far as religious freedom, I'm just guessing the list didn't have a spectrum of, on one end, Jesus loves you and is happy with you, and on the other end, Pol Pot thinks this is a great idea. I think that because there you're coloring the interpretation of what the list is.
Right.
If it is a simple ranking, that seems fair, regardless of how you're coming into it. But this is what I think you're very accurate and very appropriately pointing out. If you're placing the lawmakers on a list that also on one side of the spectrum has something like Hitler, Pol Pot, Mao Zedong on one side, and then you have Jesus on the other side of it, I think you're drawing conclusions based on the list.
Yeah.
And I know it's somewhat of an absurd example, but that's the example that I saw in the ADL and the SPLC in some cases, more in the SPLC than the ADL, where they were putting people on lists where it's like, I'm going to put you next to Hitler. Wait, hang on a sec. I think we can have a little bit of a discussion that maybe this group that might want something that you disagree with politically is not getting to the point of saying our solution is going to be to put people on trains and then camps and then from there. I think some nuance and understanding is reasonable in that situation. Just like I'm assuming on your list it wasn't Jesus loves you, Pol Pot's a big fan.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a really good point. And I don't want to totally dismiss analyzing organizations out there that really are hateful organizations that like advocate for violence against people based upon immutable characteristics, like that. They exist and they should be analyzed and evaluated, and people should be discouraged from joining them. But when, and I think somebody pointed this out, it was on Fox, that the Muslim Brotherhood is not on the SPLC hate list, but Focus on the Family is, maybe you're getting it wrong and you're just using it to advance a political end, and you're not being really honest about what you're trying to do. So we'd love to hear from you on this. The FBI now cutting its ties with the Anti-Defamation League. Kash Patel saying Jim Comey disgraced the FBI by writing, quote, love letters, unquote, to the ADL and embedding agents with an extreme group functioning like a terrorist organization and the disgraceful operation they ran spying on Americans. This was not law enforcement. It was activism dressed up as counterterrorism, and it put Americans in danger. That era is finished. The FBI formally rejects Comey's policies and any partnership with the Anti-Defamation League. The Anti-Defamation League released a statement on Wednesday evening saying that it has deep respect for the Bureau and law enforcement as we prepare to observe our holiest day of the year on the Jewish calendar. We have seen the statement from FBI Director Patel regarding the FBI's relationship with ADL. ADL has deep respect for the FBI and law enforcement officers at all levels across the country who work tirelessly every single day to protect all Americans regardless of their ancestry, religion, ethnicity, faith, political affiliation, or any other point of difference. So will we see some changes within ADL? Do you support what the FBI is doing here to cut ties with the ADL? And what do you think of these types of groups that create lists that lump together traditional Christian conservative thought with extremists like the KKK? Give us a call.
I got a question, too, on this one. And this is kind of trying to expand the conversation a little bit. And we'd love to have your phone calls, 303-696-1971, 303-696-1971. I want to kind of take this from the ADL and the lists and talk about how they're characterizing people and broaden this a little bit larger into the Israeli-Hamas war. Does this push back on the ADL create tensions, possibly, between either the Jewish community in America and the Trump administration? Could it possibly create tensions between the Trump administration and between Israel? And the last one is the really uncomfortable question, is if we are, as myself, I'm saying myself, critiquing the ADL on a lack of nuance in separating out who is a hated group and who is an extremist and how we define people, does that mean some of those liberal protesters about how Israel's executing the war and who's being lumped into which list might actually be making a salient point that we should listen to? Not saying they're right, but if we're lumping them into the wrong lists, if that's the critique, how far does that go? I'm not sure it's a fair question, but I'm curious to see what the audience thinks.
Give us a call, 303-696-1971. Text us on the Dan Caplis Law text line at 720-819-5115. Guys, let's talk Gyrie's. Every single day I get to enjoy the wonderful Hunter Douglas custom blinds, shades, and shutters that have been installed at the Hunt House. The remote control. It's amazing the technology they have with blinds right now. We have one window that's kind of on the backside of a bath and tub, and it was hard to get to. And now I just go beep, beep with a remote control, and it goes down and up. Fantastic. We are thrilled with the Hunter Douglas blinds, shades, and shutters that were custom installed at our house. They brought out lasers to make sure that they were measured perfectly. They brought out paint samples to our house so we could see what it would look like, the color would look like, the blind samples. We got to try it all in our home, see how it would look. My wife is thrilled as well. Guy Reese has locations all throughout the Denver metro area, and as I mentioned, they offer personalized in-home consultations. They come to you. So get the same expert advice that we got in our home right in your own home. Do yourself a favor. Update your home. Get started today. Visit Guyrys, GUIRYS.com, Guyrys.com to schedule your in-home consultation. See the great people there. You'll be sure to thank me. And we'll continue with your phone calls and texts. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's talk leader, News Talk 710, KNUS.
Welcome back to the Jeff and Bill Show. The FBI has formally cut ties with the Anti-Defamation League, saying it's far too political. Became a activist operation where they may disagree with certain policy differences or values that you may have, lumped you all together as extremists, worked with the FBI, and it became a problem. Kash Patel citing James Comey's 2017 address at the Anti-Defamation League National Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C., where he declared his and the FBI's, quote, love, unquote, for the organization. He began by referencing a 2014 speech, which he called a, quote, love letter to the ADL, unquote, adding, 3 years later, I can say, from the perspective of the FBI, we're still in love with you. We're not only educating ourselves, we're working with the ADL to build bridges in the communities we serve. For more than 100 years, we have advocated for fairness and equality, and for all of that, we are grateful as law enforcement and national security agency, yes, but also as Americans and as humans. He concluded his speech with the words, love the FBI. The ADL has recently faced backlash from Elon Musk, Republican lawmakers for listing Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk's organization, as an extremist group. As the result, the group removed its entire glossary of extremism and hate on Tuesday. With over 1,000 entries written over many years, the ADL glossary of extremism has served as a source of high-level information on a wide range of topics for years. At the same time, an increasing number of entries in the glossary were outdated, the ADL wrote on X. We also saw a number of entries intentionally misrepresented and misused. The organization also said that retiring the glossary would allow it to explore new strategies and create approaches to deliver our data and present our research more effectively. All right, so let's say you want to create a group or a list that has terrible groups on it. I don't think Nick Fuentes is a conservative. I think he is an extremist. He's attacked me.
Here's the question, though.
For having, though, here's what he attacked me for. You ready for this?
Yeah.
My friend, who is a pro-life leader, a national pro-life leader, when she was in college, had a child out of wedlock with a black man who happened to be now a professional sports athlete, okay? Yeah. Had a child with him, kept the baby, didn't abort it, came to her faith, got very serious about her faith in Jesus Christ, has a fine marriage now. The Groypers and Nick Fuentes attacked this pro-life leader for having a black child. And when I went to go defend her, saying, guys, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. She's a national pro-life figure, and her entire life represents this embracing the sanctity of human life. And you're attacking her because of the skin color of her child? Are you kidding me? And then they turn their guns on me.
Well,
so I think you need to point out that some of these people are terrible, but I don't want them to be murdered. So how do you do that? What do you think?
Now, I think you can point out they're terrible. Here's the thing, though, that I think it's difficult when you take someone like a Nick Fuentes and say, I don't think he's conservative. And the only reason I say that is that it exists upon a spectrum. And if it's okay to say, I don't think Nick Fuentes is a conservative, then it gives permission for some Democrats to say Antifa is not liberal. I'm just because of extremist behavior. That I think that both sides need to own and acknowledge the extremism. And the only reason I say that is not to label each side as an extremist, but to understand that both sides, there are extremists on the continuum. And not only should you have your radar up about the other side, but also about the people that can use the same language and ideas that you use in order to gain other things. Because I think they're extremists on both sides. I see extremists on the liberal side, and I see extremists on the conservative side.
I think it's important. I disagree with the idea that they're on the same sides. So
what do you mean?
Here's what I would like to see. I would like to see classical liberals, and I put classical liberals, don't think like Democrat. Think somebody who embraces free speech, dialogue, kind of like a 1960s Berkeley liberal, okay? And I would put you in that category, Bill. I think you are a classical liberal in the sense of the traditional founding principles of free speech, freedom of religion, those types of things, okay? I think it's perfectly reasonable for you guys to look at Antifa and go, you're not a classical liberal organization. You are bullies. You act like authoritarians. You embrace violence. You're willing to harm people you disagree with. You are not on our side. You're not one of us. I don't want you one of us. I think we could look at the same people like Nick Fuentes and others who somehow believe that a person's melatonin has anything to do with their lives and go, the Republican Party was founded as the anti-slave party. Okay? You are not one of us. You're not on our side. There's nothing about what you're talking about that's anywhere remotely in the same universe as what a traditional conservative would believe. You're a racist. So I think it's perfectly fine for either side to look at the way you represented it, our side. I don't think they're on our side. I don't think they're part of what we do. And I think it's fine for classical liberals, Kennedy Democrats, to look at Antifa and go, you're not on our side. You don't represent anything we work towards.
Now, the question I would have is, then as the conversation goes forward, would you recommend that people that are conservatives to stop saying that Antifa are a bunch of crazy leftists, a bunch of crazy liberals? Because that's what would be needed in order to continue the conversation going forward. Would be you also would have to acknowledge and not label. And I'm using you as the royal you. I'm not just saying you. I'm saying you, our audience, Jeff and Bill show. So I'm using it that way. I'm not just targeting my partner here across the glass. I'm not doing that. I'm not coming at him that way. What I'm saying is that the larger royal you would have to also change the way in which you describe that side as well. Just like we would be fair, absolutely, to critique the Democrats, to come back and say, well, you have to stop saying that Nick Fuentes then is an extreme conservative.
Right.
We'd have to stop that. So it would have to be, a shoe on both feet.
Yeah.
And so do you think that can happen, or are we just, because of our politics, it's much more convenient and it's much more expeditious for us to label our political opponents with these extremists?
I agree with you, and it's going to require nuance, and it becomes problematic.
Oh, no. Nuance, the problem.
Yeah, exactly. It becomes problematic.
Yeah.
If you have someone like, why am I forgetting her name? Lorena Garcia saying, I am Antifa, and she's an elected Democrat.
Good point.
But you could, if you have somebody that's an elected Republican saying, I'm a groiper, for instance, you go, well, then pick one or the other. Because the Republican Party does not believe that someone's skin color has anything to do with their actual character. It's like we lost this sense of our history, that we were founded as the party to oppose slavery, the party of embrace somebody on the content of their character, not their skin color. So in both those cases, if you're going to say the Democrat Party is made up of classical liberals that believe in free speech, freedom of religion, and not engaging in violence with your opponents, then you can't be Antifa, Lorena Garcia. And if you're going to be a Republican who embraces the idea of judging somebody by the content of their character, not their skin color, you can't be a groiper. And those need to be challenged. And to Bill's original point 45 minutes ago, It's going to require nuance. All right, we'll continue.
No.
Speaking of Bill and nuance, we got You Choose the News coming up. You're listening to The Jeff and Bill Show.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710, KNUS. The silly stuff's ahead.
Welcome to the Jeff and Bill Show. It's that time on Fridays where we give you what you really want. You choose the news, loser edition.
Yes, I love that we come in on the car crash point of the song there. That's fantastic. Yes, you know it is the time for the returning stories to get a second shot at glory. It's a loser edition. Here we go.
Man, you are one pathetic loser.
Loser! Let's go. Loser! You're a loser!
The Losers Club. Bunch of losers.
You're such a loser. You made me feel like a loser!
She's a loser. You are such a loser.
No, the introduction is not talking about me. It is talking about the stories that we passed over earlier this week on You Choose the News. The stories that were deemed unworthy of our attention by my partners in crime. That is both Blake Olson and Jeff Hunt. You know how this works? Silly stories. I browse interwebs, give them stupid headlines because nobody in charge is paying attention. So we, when left unsupervised, yeah, fun things are going to happen. Alrighty, here we go. Mr. Hunt and Mr. Olson joining us from the news department. Here are your returning stories this morning. Headline number 1, paying respects. Headline number 2, killer timing. Headline number 3, maybe it's basilisk poison. And headline number 4, immigrant takeover. Mr. Hunt, your choice.
What's basilisk?
Basilisk, it's a lizard.
Okay, let's do that one.
Okay, maybe it's basilisk poison. A 63-year-old woman recently showed up at the emergency department in Birmingham in the Women's Hospital in Boston with severe stomach pain and vomiting. She told doctors for the past month she had developed severe nausea and non-bloody vomiting and a pain she described as a burning feeling that spread from her upper abdomen through her right side and around her back. Nothing she did made it better. Well, the doctors started looking at her medical history, diabetes, chronic kidney disease, opioid use disorder. There's some other things, GRD. Yeah, but it just didn't seem to work out right. So they eventually did some lab tests and found out she has a Bezoar, a gastric Bezoar.
What's a Bezoar?
It's a mass that forms in your stomach. There are several different kinds. She has a phytobezoar, mainly made from clumped fruit and vegetable components that are non-digestible materials, such like cellulose. But those that are Harry Potter fans understand that you use a Bezoar to counteract basilisk poison. See, there was the clue.
There was the clue. That you pulled that together.
Yeah, there was the clue.
Hilarious.
That is amazing.
Blake Olson, paying respects, killer timing, or immigrant takeout?
Paying your respects.
Yeah, paying your respects. Here we're in Minola, Texas. Texas man's accused of holding another man at gunpoint after hitting his dog with a car and killing the animal. The 22-year-old is accused of forcing the man to dig the grave for the dog and then withdraw money from the ATM to compensate him for his loss. Yes, he's charged with aggravated robbery and aggravated kidnapping. Yes, he literally gave him the shovel and said, dig the hole or you're going to get 2 of these. Yeah, I know. Just like in the movies. Who would have thought?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. He took him to the ATM and had him withdraw more money, and then took him back to his house, and he got a better gun to shoot him with. There's a long story here that involves a whole bunch of questionable decisions. It's just really strange.
Boy, you got that right.
Yeah. All righty, final choice this morning, Mr. Hunt. Killer timing or immigrant takeover?
Killer timing.
Yeah, killer timing. Here we're in Virginia Beach, Virginia. A Virginia Beach man suffered a massive heart attack over a month ago. It is a widowmaker. Luckily, he had the heart attack right in the exact spot where he should have. He crashed his car right into a cardiologist's office. Yes, the cardiologist heard the big bang in the front of his office, ran outside, and promptly started giving CPR and giving him treatment. If he would have had the heart attack anywhere else at any other point in time, he was coming from the place where he just worked out, any other point of having the heart attack, he's dead. But because he crashed into the cardiologist's office, he's alive.
Nothing like the drive-through.
Yep, it's all about timing.
Divine intervention.
Yes.
Speaking of divine intervention, we're going to be hanging out with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Craig McElroy is going to be joining us because they've got a new president.
This is Denver's Talk Leader, News Talk 710 KNUS.